I'm so thrilled to introduce tonight's speaker. In fact, I'm kvelling, which literally means bursting with pride. Because besides for our speaker being the co-founder, CEO, and president of Caribou Biosciences, a genome editing company, all that information I got off of Wikipedia, by the way, Rachel Haurwitz is also a former bat mitzvah student of mine from way back when I was a baby cantor in Austin, Texas. And just so you know, Maya Jackson, she did a great job at her bat mitzvah. Rachel, her husband Felix, and their wonderful daughter Naomi joined Beth Am a few years ago, and we are so fortunate to have them as part of our community, and it is so great to have you here tonight. So I welcome you, Rachel, to our Bima.
Thank you so much, Kentrish.
You're welcome.
Good Shabbos. It is my tremendous honor to share a few thoughts with you this evening about this week's Torah portion. And as she just gave it away, I'm particularly tickled because the first time I ever had the opportunity to share my perspective on a Torah portion was when I became a bat mitzvah, and Cantor Shbal was a member of the clergy on the Bima with me that day. I'm delighted by her invitation to repeat that experience tonight. However, we will not talk about how many years ago that first instance was. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge the teachings of Rabbis Jonathan Sachs, Amiel Hirsch, and Philip Rice, which have all influenced what I'll be sharing today. So this week's Torah portion is called Korach. Where are we in the Torah? Moses has successfully led the Jews out of Egypt and through the worst of the wilderness, and they're living in relative prosperity as they await entry into the land of Israel. The Parsha kicks off with Korach, a member of the tribe of Levi, instigating a mutiny against Moses and Aaron. He and his followers argue that all members of the Jewish community are holy and should have the ability to communicate with God. The Torah says in Numbers 16:3, they combined against Moses and Aaron and said to them, quote, "You have gone too far, for all the community are holy, all of them, and Adonai is in their midst. Why then do you raise yourselves above Adonai's congregation?" Candidly, it's a hard parsha to read. Those who led the mutiny and their families are actually swallowed up whole by the earth on which they stood. Then 250 men who participated in the mutiny were killed by fire. A plague then killed an additional 14,700 Israelites. Following that, God commanded that a chieftain from each of the 12 tribes bring a staff to the tent of meeting, one of which was brought by Aaron. The following day, Moses found that Aaron's staff, and only Aaron's staff, had sprouted, blossomed, and borne almonds. The staffs were then presented to the Israelites. God then commanded Aaron and his offspring to be responsible for the priestly duties that they, and no one else, must undertake. There are two different ways I'd like to reflect on this portion of the Torah. The first is that this story reminds us that within our community, we must acknowledge that we each bring different strengths, and each therefore have different responsibilities to provide, contribute, or lead in the context of our community. Now, few of us have the voice of God, as Aaron did, to tell us what our role is, and therefore most of us spend a big fraction of our lives figuring out where we best fit and how we best contribute. The second level on which I'd like to reflect on this story is global. I believe that this parsha is also a key reminder of the importance of Jewish particularism, and that the world is better for having Jews and Judaism, including in our ancestral home in the land of Israel. Perhaps in another year or another time, this would be a boring and perfunctory statement to make. And yet today, almost 9 months to the day since October 7, this statement takes on profound additional weight. Prior generations inherently understood and valued Jewish particularism and the centrality of the Jewish people, in part thanks to the consistent existential threats posed by various governments and people over many decades and centuries. Time and time again, Western liberalism has not proved to be protective of the Jewish people. This is perhaps most pronounced by the example of early 1900s Germany, one of the most leading Western cultures of its time, where Jews played prominent roles across society, industry, and academia. This was, of course, followed by the Holocaust carried out by Nazi Germany. In recent days, I've spent quite a bit of time reflecting on the experiences of my grandfather and his parents, who were part of the early reform movement in Berlin and who all survived the Holocaust in Berlin. They went from being well-respected members of society who ran a family business that paved roads in Germany to losing nearly everything. My great-grandfather spent time in a concentration camp, while my grandfather served many years of forced slave labor. In the midst of all of this, my great-grandmother, who was not Jewish, took on an extraordinary role for her family. Along with many other non-Jewish women married to Jewish men, my great-grandmother participated in what is now called the Rosenstrasse protest, literally named for the street on which it took place in Berlin in 1943. These women protested the deportation of their husbands and family members, the only such public mass protest against the Nazis as far as I can tell, and it ultimately resulted in the safe release, rather than deportation, of nearly 1,800 Jews, including my great-grandfather. At a time when Jews were literally powerless, politically, financially, or otherwise, to protect or advocate for themselves, extraordinary people like my great-grandmother risked everything to fight for the Jewish people. Fast forward to today. Post-October 7, I find it beyond befuddling that some of the loudest anti-Zionist voices today are coming from within the Reformed Jewish movement. How did we get here? Perhaps one piece of the puzzle is that my generation of American-born Jews, and those younger than me, have been raised in an environment of relative peace and incredible prosperity, making it hard to imagine that the existential threats that our grandparents, great-grandparents, and earlier ancestors routinely faced could ever happen again. Now, I was careful to say American-born Jews. I encourage any of you to speak with my husband, Felix, who was born in the Soviet Union and was lucky to leave there in 1989 and come to the US with his family in 1990. No one has to convince him that the risk of crushing anti-Semitism is real after his and his family's direct experiences in the Soviet Union. Today, too many of my peers seem to be abandoning any sense of Jewish particularism or a specific love of the Jewish people in favor of universalism and an expectation that Western liberalism is the solution to the protection of the Jewish people and to a better world. At the end of the day, I believe we each must start from a very simple place. We must believe the following. I am a member of the Jewish community, and I have a responsibility to other Jews. Following that, we can disagree on many things, including how to do Jewish or politics here in the US or Israel. I believe Parsha Korach is a kick in the pants for us this year, a call to action for Jews to simultaneously embrace our individual responsibilities to contribute uniquely to our community, as well as our collective responsibility to contribute to the Jewish people, our continuity, and the state of Israel. How do we bolster our collective identity as Jews and embrace our unique role as a people in this world? Let's turn again to the Torah portion. I'd like to read the following the Rabbi Jonathan Sachs once said of this parsha. Quote, "When we read the story of Korach, our attention tends to be focused on the rebels. We don't give as much reflection as we might to the response of Moses. Was it right? Was it wrong? It's a complex story. As the Ramban explains, it is no accident that the Korach rebellion happened in the aftermath of the story of the spies. So long as the people expected to enter the promised land, they stood to lose more than they could gain by challenging Moses' leadership. He had successfully negotiated all obstacles in the past. He was their best hope. But now, a whole generation was condemned to die in the wilderness. Now they had nothing to lose. When people have nothing to lose, rebellions happen," end quote. So let's apply this thinking to today, post-October 7. What do we, Reformed Jews living in America, have to lose? I believe we have so very much to lose. The situation in the Middle East currently poses an existential threat to the state of Israel and to the lives of so many Jews. The future of our collective sacred community relies on each of us to heed the teachings of this week's Torah portion. Another key theme of this parsha is the role of leadership, and the story examines both the mutineers and Moses and finds them wanting. It is a deeply honest reflection of the humanity of the individuals involved. In closing tonight, I ask each of you to consider what leadership role you will play in our community for the Jewish people now and going forward. Shabbat Shalom.